All right, what's up, everybody? This is Trent and Kyle here, where we just came up with the idea to do a pod earlier this week. Really excited about it. We've historically had a lot of really interesting conversations about a lot of different topics, whether it's movies or sports or whatever it is. And we just always kind of go on like crazy tangents and talk about all this stuff. And so we thought might as well record a little bit of it and see where it takes us. So, yeah, Kyle, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, me and Trent have been great friends for a couple of years now. We met in college. We both go to Oregon State University, which is where we kind of first started having these conversations, getting very analytical about sports, and we can talk for hours and hours about it. And both kind of having the passion that we do, we decided to kind of launch this podcast. We think it could be a nice creative outlook for us. Just kind of something that we could do on a weekly basis to kind of give some structure to our very unstructured conversations that we would be having regardless of if we were recording or anything like that. So yeah, we're really excited to be launching this podcast. We're really excited to kind of have a little creative outlet for our sports analysis and our sports research and everything like that.
And another focus we kind of have that we've talked about a little bit is we're not really interested in creating like outrageous statements and headlines and just kind of following the pathway that basic sports media has kind of followed over the past recent years or whatever it's been. And we really want to focus on analysis and kind of expressing our ideas and new concepts and just bouncing them off of each other and enhancing the way we interpret sports rather than just trying to get a headline, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, something that we're both pretty passionate about is the idea that anybody can kind of become a content creator in the current day. You don't only consume your media through mainstream platforms such as ESPN and things like that. Anybody can kind of give their own analysis, give their own thoughts. And we wanted to kind of be a part of that space, regardless of how big we get or anything like that. We just thought it would be really cool to kind of be a part of that space ourselves. So that's kind of the reason why we did this. A few inspirations that both of us kind of have for this. JJ Redick's Old Man and the Three podcast is a big one that I know both of us watch consistently. I watch quite a bit of Blazers related podcasts, Blazers Uprise, Rip City Rundown being two specific ones. I watch a lot of hip hop podcasts as well. That's kind of outside of sports, but similar concept. We're big podcast listeners / watchers, and we want to kind of give it a shot ourselves.
Yeah, and another thing that I kind of mentioned earlier when we were preparing for this and talking about it is Draymond Green always references the idea of the new media, and he's really come out like pretty strongly with other former athletes to kind of change the narrative of sports talk and media, and we want to be a part of that same wave, if that makes any sense. And while we aren't experts in anything yet, I'm a recent college graduate. Kyle's going to be a college graduate a year from now. Eventually we will have an expertise in some shape or form, but at this point we're fans and we're fanatics of just sports in general and competition. And so we're going to talk about what we know up to this point and be very transparent with what we aren't experts in. But at the same time, we're always going to be learning and getting better. And so you'll get to kind of see us develop throughout this creative process and have a greater knowledge base throughout all of it. And we'll be very open to explain what we have learned and what the source is. Like for instance, specifically right now, just graduated from Oregon State, like Kyle said, degree in finance. And now I'm going to start law school in August, first week of August, with the intention of carving my way into sports and maybe being contract focused and working for a team or something of that nature. And this summer I have about a month break and we're focusing on the podcast. And at the same time, I'm doing a course on the collective bargaining agreement in the MBA. And so hopefully as I learn more week by week, I'll be able to give a more in-depth analysis of the things we're going to talk about.
And to kind of give you guys a little bit about my kind of career plans, career path. I'm pursuing a career in analytics. I'm pursuing a major in business analytics right now, working in the data space, working with large sets of data, and kind of breaking real life scenario down into quantifiable and objective numbers. It's something I'm very passionate about. I love kind of explaining how things happen through numbers, because a number is a number no matter which way you slice it. And I think the interpretation of that number leads to a lot of different conversation. That's where a lot of disagreement and good debate comes from, in my opinion. So I'm very fascinated by that space. I'm currently working in an internship as a business analyst, data analyst, I guess. And on the side, I'm working on a basketball related data project where I'm looking to kind of highlight the best bargain contracts in the league, the NBA, based on a different number of statistical criteria. I agree with a lot of what Trent said about kind of not having expertise yet, but that being something that we want to be very upfront about, very transparent about, and eventually wanting to add to the space as we continue to learn, as we continue to grow, as we continue to get deeper into our careers. We want to kind of offer that side, that expertise that we will have at some point. We think that's something that unique that we can offer to the space. And I think that's one of the most important things when it comes to conversation about things like sports, is offering something unique to the conversation. And that's really what we're trying to do here. Finally, one thing that I feel very passionate about, that Trent even might disagree with me on, is I think there's a lot of value in sports conversation in being a fan. I think, yes, it's very important to put your biases aside in a lot of scenarios, but there is an element of sports. There's an element of being a fan of a team that is very unique to sports. And I think it's very important, the emotional element, and we'll get into this with the Blazers and Damian Lillard a little bit, but the emotional attachment you have to a sports team is, you can't kind of remove that, in my opinion, from conversation. It's important to acknowledge it. It's important to recognize your biases because of it. But there's value in being a hardcore fan of a team, devoting so much of your time to it. And you shouldn't shy away from that necessarily. You should almost embrace it, I would say.
Yeah, I actually wholeheartedly agree with what you just said. And that's why I actually think we should address like what teams we have biases to, just so upfront people know where we're kind of leaning and where we can't really quite be objective. But I do agree with you that there's a massive value in that, and that's what makes sports so emotional and ties people in. And with us being massive Blazer fans and Oregon State fans, like we just said, both from Oregon. Kyle grew up in Portland. I grew up in Medford, Southern Oregon. But with Damian requesting a trade recently, like, it's a really good sense of how emotionally attached we can be to one player. Like, I remember exactly where I was when I was 12 years old when he got drafted. And he's been essentially my hero, my role model from that point until now. And so when you realizing that he's leaving, like, you get to really understand how that emotional attachment is like super important. And the way you almost get raised by the people you admire and watch. It's almost like an uncle or something like that, because you listen to every interview and you really die on each word that they say. And so it's that's why sports are so great, and that's why I'm in love with it. So,
Exactly.
So yeah, Kyle, if you want to kind of talk about your other biases outside of the Blazers
Sure.
and Oregon State, I can follow up after you with that.
Yeah. So obviously, the Blazers are my number one favorite team. They're the team I follow the most. They're Portland's team. I think you should be a fan of your kind of home team unless you're from somewhere else. I think there's a lot of value in that. So the Portland Trail Blazers are the number one team that I have the most knowledge on, the most expertise in, and am the biggest fan of. My second favorite team is the Pittsburgh Steelers. My dad has been a fan of the Steelers ever since he started watching football. He picked one of the Super Bowls from the 70s. I believe it was the Steelers' third Super Bowl. That was his first football game that he watched. He flipped the coin with his brother. And if he landed on heads, he was going to root for the Steelers. And if he landed on tails, I think it was Cowboys was the other team, but I'm not positive. And it was heads. He was a Steelers fan from there on. And he kind of passed that down to me and my brother. We've been Steelers fans since. Don't have any family in Pittsburgh or anything like that, but that's the story behind that very briefly. They're my second favorite team. The NFL is my favorite league to watch collectively. I'm more invested in the 32 teams as a whole than even the NBA, which is a very, very, very close second for me. I'm a very big fan of the Steelers. I definitely have biases there. But getting back to what I said about basketball versus football, I have played basketball for many years of my life. I played basketball in high school. I think I have a pretty fundamental understanding of the game and how it works, even at a professional level. And while I keep wanting to kind of improve my knowledge in the NFL and in the game of football, and I definitely think I have a pretty strong knowledge there. I always tell people this. I think I'm missing something having never played football in my life. There's just something about being out there and being able to run through kind of sets and playing at a high level that it's not impossible, but it's very hard to replicate through just watching the sport. So admittedly, I think I have more knowledge in terms of like on court, on field things in terms of basketball versus football, and more knowledge about the Blazers versus the Steelers. But those are pretty much my two only biases with sports. Oregon State, we kind of talked about. We both go to the school. There's obviously a ton of bias in that. But in terms of college sports, college basketball, I guess the Beavers aren't too prominent, so I don't think that bias really weighs in too often. College basketball, I really wouldn't say I root for a team outside of the Beavers. I kind of fall in love with players, fall in love with teams during the season, but I don't go into a season rooting for a team outside of Oregon State. College football is somewhat of a blind spot for me, I would say. I don't watch much college football outside of the Beavers / the Pac-12. Never have been too interested in it. I'll watch the playoffs, I'll watch bowl games, but that's definitely a blind spot for me. And I definitely don't have a team outside of Oregon State there. So, Trent, do you want to kind of go through your other biases outside the Blazers?
Yeah, I actually like the direction you went as far as talking about sports specifically and how they kind of differ. So I'll address that first, and then I'll get into the teams. So as far as football and basketball, I played both growing up all the way through my senior year. I grew up a better basketball player up until about my sophomore year of high school, and then I kind of tailed in towards football a little bit more. I just felt like there's something about that Kyle kind of touched on, that there's an intensity in football that you don't find in anything else. The way each play individually there's so much build up to it, and it's slow and then it's fast. And then the way it operates is just something that really drew me to it since I was super young. And so as far as my knowledge base and my understanding, it's pretty close between football and basketball. Two leagues I watch the most are definitely the NBA and NFL. It really goes seasonally. When it's the heart of the NFL season, I'm a diehard NFL fan, and then it tails off to the NBA, and I'm a diehard NBA fan. And I have this conversation in my head of which do I like more, and it's just whatever time of the year you catch me in. And as far as from a career standpoint, I know I want to work for either an NBA team or an NFL team, or hopefully at some point. That's definitely a goal of mine. And I have no idea which one I would tail into. I'm definitely leaning basketball right now because I learned a lot over this past half year as far as watching the NBA. But as far as team biases, so Oregon State, Blazers, going to be Arizona State because that's where I'm going to law school, but I'm not well versed in ASU athletics yet at all. Miami Heat are my number 2 NBA team, my NBA team in the East. And Kyle knows a lot about that. Kind of at the beginning of college, my freshman year, I kind of secondary chose the Heat as my team because I've loved Jimmy Butler since he was on the Bulls. Longtime Jimmy Butler fan. As you will hear as we talk about basketball over the next few episodes, pretty early on, you'll realize I really like agitators, assholes, if you will. Players like Marcus Smart, Patrick Beverley, Jimmy Butler. I like players like that because that's how I was. I'm the type of people that kind of ruffle feathers and really are winners to a certain degree. And so I really like the Heat because of that. And then all the way over the last 4 years, I've just been a diehard Heat fan, back after the regular season and into the playoffs. And I derive so much enjoyment from watching them. Even this past playoffs, even though they lost in 5 to the Nuggets, I had so much fun watching them. I watched every single game, every single interview after. As far as the NFL, as I just stated, I'm a massive NFL fan, but I'm in a weird way homeless. I don't really have an NFL team. And then MLB wise, I'm not extremely well versed in baseball, but I'm learning as much as I can. One of my best friends is a giant baseball fan. But I would consider myself a Padres fan. That's definitely closest team I could find. And then I'm also really into the UFC. Over the past 3 to 4 years, I've really got bought in and started watching a lot. And particular, I love Israel Adesanya. I watch every single one of his fights, all his interviews, all that stuff. I really enjoy watching him and the way he goes about things and the way he just kind of has like a ninja-like approach to certain things. And I think it's very interesting. So yeah, that's pretty much all we have on the introduction part. As far as the episode today, as we stated, we're going to be talking about a lot of different sports and a lot of different topics. But for today's episode, we're just going to focus on the NBA specifically. kind of first half will be about the Blazers and how things have unfolded over the past few months. And then we'll kind of drive into the rest of the NBA and free agency acquisitions and stuff like that. Let's get into it.
Yep.
All right. So you want to start us off with like kind of an overview? Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, we are starting our podcast at a crazy time in Blazers kind of content. Damian Lillard requested a trade yesterday morning. Our franchise superstar for since I've been watching basketball. The first season that I started watching the NBA, Nolan Smith was our point guard. And the next year we drafted Damian Lillard. Didn't know anything about him, didn't know what Weber State was. And he kind of made me fall in love with basketball, fall in love with this team. And he's given us such great memories, carried our franchise really the last couple of years. The only all-star that he's played with was LaMarcus Aldridge in his first couple of years. And besides that, he's been the face of the franchise, the face of the city pretty much, and our one kind of franchise superstar. So him requesting a trade is very disappointing in my opinion, very sad. Not disappointed in Dame or anything like that, but just disappointed with the front office for one, and just how this situation has played out, the situation being his entire career, not giving him a chance to win in Portland when everything he's always said shows that he wants to do that. I don't think he wants to leave. I think he kind of feels forced out at this point. But I think he really wanted to make it work in Portland, and for that not to be possible at this point is it's pretty sad. But we're going to look towards the future. A lot of this fan base is currently kind of getting on social media and kind of mouthing off on our management, and that's well deserved, I think. There's a lot to be upset about, specifically with how the management has kind of approached the situation with its lack of transparency and things like that. But I don't really think we're here to do that on our podcast today. I think it's a little redundant, and I think that there's other topics that we could talk about that would be kind of better suited. But to kind of give a brief timeline of how we got here, I don't want to bag on Neil Olshey too much. That's in the past. But that is the reason why a lot of this has happened. Neil Olshey, the GM for the Portland Trailblazers for the majority of Dame's career, up until I believe 3 seasons ago, failed to kind of put a supporting cast around Dame for whatever reason. There's multiple nuances to that. That's at the time where the Warriors dynasty was alive and active. But failed to kind of give Dame a superstar, give Dame an all-star teammate. The last season that he was GM, I believe, the Blazers made the conference finals. He was GM this season after that as well. Same, pretty much linking up with the time that Paul Allen was still the owner. And things happen. We go into the bubble. We are the 8th seed that year. Franchise kind of tailing off. And over that little 2-year period, the franchise the team seems to no longer be a true contender in the West. New management, obviously the team being handed over to Jody Allen. The Neil Olshey scandal happens. He's replaced by Joe Cronin. The franchise doesn't look to, they don't look for outside sources for the GM position. They look to hire in-house, and they do not interview other GMs besides Joe Cronin. He was always their man to replace Neil. So that happens. And Joe's true first moves came 2 seasons ago, where he chose to trade CJ McCollum, Robert Covington, and Norman Powell, 3 of the 5 starters at the time, to kind of go with a soft rebuild, if you will. I think he did not get enough assets for those 3 players. Those were 3 starters at the time, and the return was Keon Johnson, Justice Winslow, Eric Bledsoe's expiring contract for Norman Rocco, and then Josh Hart, and then a few other assets, I guess, that didn't amount to much with the CJ trade. I guess they did end up getting a Milwaukee first that was later traded for Jeremy Grant, which was a good move by Joe Cronin. But that's kind of what the Blazers accumulated in terms of assets from that little soft rebuild. That season, the Blazers were bad. They went to a little bit of a soft tank and had the 7th pick in the draft. They chose to elect Shaedon Sharpe with the pick. There was a lot of pressure to trade that pick for an OG Anunoby type of player. Joe elected to take Shaedon Sharpe, which was his second great move, I would say. I think not giving into that pressure and selecting the 19-year-old rookie was a good move. I am all for that decision. And Shaden Sharp kind of enters the league very raw, very unproven, but with a very high skill set, a good looking jump shot. He contributes a little bit right away and then kind of struggles middle of the season. This season, the Blazers start off very strong. Some injuries happen. The lack of depth kind of rears its head. The team is a little bit out of the play-in around the trade deadline, where Joe chooses to sell at the deadline, trading Josh Hart for Cam Reddish in a first. And the Gary Payton, also sell Gary Payton for 5 seconds, 2 of which were swapped for Matisse Thybulle.
Which I might interject and say a direct quote from him after the deadline passed. If that's all right with you.
Yep.
He said, and this ties into our frustration with the current stuff that's happening. So he said this exactly. We're going to be ridiculously aggressive to the point where when we push all our chips in, deal to deal, you might look and say, they gave a lot for that guy. But no, that's just us pushing all of our chips in. We feel extremely obligated to put a great roster around Damian Lillard. So that's where kind of the frustration ties in and the timeline continues.
It's very important to bring up that quote, because this is what he directly told the fan base in a press conference. And you could assume that he was telling Damian Lillard the same thing, especially because after this, the Blazers fully tank. And what happened was, it was a game against the Utah Jazz. Damian Lillard had a great game. The Blazers won the game. And after that, the Blazers asked Damian Lillard to sit out the rest of the season so that they could get a better draft pick. And this is just really difficult to kind of do to your franchise player. But that was the direction that the front office wanted to go. They told Damian Lillard, look, if you sit out the rest of the season, we're probably going to lose a lot of games. We're going to get a higher chance at a generational prospect, that being Victor Wembanyama. And our pick is going to be better if we lose more games. That pick being better will help us get more assets to kind of build around you and get you some help in Portland, give you a chance to kind of win here. And Damian Lillard was not happy with that. He kind of sounded off at the press conference following that about how obviously he's not going to come out and bash the front office or anything like that. But you could tell in that press conference that he's very upset. A competitor like Damian Lillard wanted to make the playoffs last year, and he thought, as bad as the roster was, he thought he could have got at least into the play-in. He could have put the team on his back and do what he does and got into the play-in, and he wanted to do that. He had no appetite for tanking. Yeah, try and go for it.
Which, for some reason, I haven't thought about this yet, but if we don't sit him and we make a run and we don't end up with a top 5 pick, don't get me wrong, Scoot's a generational talent. We'll get into that later, and the direction of our franchise is in good hands. Best hands we've been in a long time as far as long term. But let's say we ended up with the 9th pick, right? And we made somewhat of a playoff run, play-in run. That's a much more tradable asset in the sense that it's an easy decision. 3 is a difficult decision because we had to make that decision between Brandon Miller and Scoot. Which one's going to be there? New Orleans comes in and they're saying that they're willing to trade for the pick, and there's all this speculation as to what we're going to do with it. Initially, when we get the lottery selection, right? Cronin immediately comes out and basically states, if we keep the pick. He says that very specifically in the interview. If we get 9 or 10, we were going to deal that pick. And that means probably we keep Damian Lillard and probably he retires a Blazer.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a crazy butterfly effect thing to think about. And I'm not necessarily saying it's the better option in the sense that, like, obviously we want to have a higher asset and obviously it's good to have Scoot Henderson. But the legacy standpoint and as fans getting the satisfaction of seeing him finish out his career here and at least having a shot to do something, you never know what would have happened at that point too, whether we could have attracted a better asset, because the market for two-way players right now, two-way wings like Jeremy Grant, the dudes we need to fill out the roster and improve the defense, very poor this year.
Yeah. Just
inevitably. And it just ended up being the year that Dame gave us the ultimatum. Right?
Yeah.
And it was the year with bad assets, bad options. And maybe next year's better. I haven't really looked at the free agents super intently yet, but that's a crazy thing to think about.
Yeah. And that's where the majority of the frustration comes from. Because if you think that using your number 3 pick, that asset on Scoot Henderson, and trading Damian Lillard for a bunch of draft capital and 1 or 2 intriguing young players, if you think that that's the best move for this franchise, kind of asset accumulation wise, that's fine. I personally think I disagree still, even solely from that aspect, but that's a fine take. I mean, I definitely see that argument. But that's not really what we're saying the problem is here. Our main problem comes from asking a player of Damian Lillard's caliber to sit out games. And I know front offices and fan bases a lot of time. I mean, we were talking about at that time, like, oh, if we could lose a few more games, we'd have 10.5% chance at Wemby. And
yeah, which is different. Which is a different conversation.
Damian Lillard doesn't care about that. He wants to go out and compete every single night. That's if you've ever played competitive sports, I think you should be able to kind of relate to that on at least some level. So that's just the unfortunate reality. Obviously, I don't think Joe thought we were going to move into the top 3. I think once we did, that kind of complicated things. I don't think Joe expected Scoot to be there at 3. I think
neither
once
did I.
He was, that complicated things as well. I think he thought he probably could have got away with just drafting Brandon Miller if he was there at 3. And then I think Dame, it's a very seamless fit there. You're not drafting a player at Dame's position. You're drafting a guy at your biggest position of need. I don't think Dame would have been happy about that, but I think there's a much less likely chance that he asks out. But butterfly effect, like we said, all of this kind of took place and has culminated in Damian Lillard asking out after 11 years with the Portland Trail Blazers. So we could talk about kind of trade packages, what we expect to get in return for Damian Lillard. Personally, this is not a great time to trade a franchise star, but it's the time that we have to do it. A lot of contending teams don't have young assets or future firsts because they've traded them for other stars. So the market for a player like Damian Lillard, who wants to go to a contender, who doesn't want to gut a roster to get him so that he has nothing left to play with, the market's not great. And that kind of leaves us with pretty much who we think is the clear-cut favorite to land Damian Lillard, and that's the Miami Heat. Trent and I talked today. Trent said he thinks around an 80% chance that Miami lands Dame. I think it's closer to 90, to be honest. If we look at their trade package, it centers around Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson. Depending on if Yusuf Nurkic is a part of the deal, Kyle Lowry's expiring contract would be coming back as well. And they can offer 3 firsts as well as 2 pick swaps, as well as Nikola Jovic. So thinking about that package, I mean, Trent, what do you kind of think about that trade package? You can kind of take this one first.
I think the X factor of that package is the third team that would come in for the deal, which is kind of inevitable because we don't want Hero. Because Hero would be the big star, like focal point of that trade.
Yeah,
we've already talked
with the most value.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense to trade for him and then all of a sudden have 4 guards again. So he would go to a third team, and so whatever that third team would deal to us is kind of the X factor. So let's say that ends up being Brooklyn, and we get Claxton. Mm-hmm. I'm super high on Claxton. I think that's like the defensive interior player we need. He's young. He, in my opinion, should have been a legitimate threat to win Defensive Player of the Year last year. I think just kind of because they traded all their assets, deadline and all that stuff, he got overlooked. But if we're bringing in Claxton, Jovic, Duncan Robinson, multiple firsts, and maybe a second or 2, I'm fine with that. I mean, I don't really feel like we need that big of a haul. Like I don't get me wrong. If I'm Cronin, I'm trying to get the most value I can. But multiple firsts and a young player that can be a starter for 4 or 5 plus years, that's enough for me. And then fulfilling Dame's desire to go to the team he wants. Like, I feel like that's enough. That maybe not necessarily enough, but we at least owe him that much. Because like we were just stating, like the main problem I just want to reiterate it. We don't have a problem with the Blazers rebuilding. We don't have a problem with Damian Lillard requesting a trade. we're sad, but we don't have a problem with it. We just have a problem with the way it was portrayed, in the sense that they continued to say that we remain committed to Damian Lillard. And even a week ago, right after they drafted Scoot, he word for word said, we remain committed to building a winner around Dame.
He was asked directly if his plan was to go into the season with Scoot Henderson and Damian Lillard on the roster, and he answered
yes. So that's the problem, is not being straightforward with your superstar, who is the most straightforward and loyal and straight shooter in the entire league, if not in league history, being a franchise player. He tells you exactly what he wants, and he's very transparent about it. Like, we should at least reciprocate that a little bit. And that's the problem with all this. And that's why I'm okay with maybe not accepting the greatest deal of all time and sending him to like Utah.
Yeah.
Like, I would have a huge problem with that. Even if it's the best return we have, the fact that we're dishing him to a team he has no interest in playing for, just for our own self-interest, I just don't think that's good business in the sense of maintaining relationships and portraying to the fans what your priorities are. That's how I feel. And so that's why, I mean, a lot of people are saying they do not want the Miami deal under any circumstances, and they think it's the worst option and all this. And I know we both feel pretty mutually about this. I don't think it's that bad of a deal.
No.
If he wants to go there, fulfill his wish. We have Shaden, Anthony, Scoot, and then whoever we get from that, and then 3 firsts. That's enough.
I agree.
That's enough to start a championship contending team in the future.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with the main kind of focal point of that Miami trade is what you'd be getting from Tyler Hero. I think Claxton would be amazing. I do think the Nets kind of have some interest in holding on to Claxton, though he is kind of their second best player right now, in my opinion.
I wouldn't dish him if I was Brooklyn.
Yeah. I think Hero is more likely to net another first or two, and I'd be fine with that.
Yeah.
Because
I'd be fine with that too.
You kind of talked about this. I mean, the Blazers have young players right now with those 3 guards, as well as you're probably getting Jovic in this deal. You drafted 2 more rookies who we'll get into in a second, but I'm pretty high on as being very solid contributors down the line. I think accumulating draft capital from a Damian Lillard trade is the most important part. I'd be fine with kind of selling him off for essentially a haul of picks and 1 or 2 kind of interesting players. Yeah. You're not going to get like an RJ Barrett or a player of that caliber who's young and has upside like that. And I'm fine with that if it means getting a fair amount of draft capital to compensate selling a top 10 player in the league like Damian Lillard.
Yeah. But that's where it comes in, though. If we put ourselves in the shoes of Joe Cronin as a general manager, what is the best return? And I referenced this when we were preparing for this recording, is I think one of the best trades ever in recent history is Paul George for, I think it was 4 or 5 first-round picks, and then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And he was coming off his rookie year, averaged 10, 5, and 5. We knew he was going to be good, but it seemed like they were totally fine with giving him up at that point, and now he's first team All NBA, averaged a block and a steal a game at 30 points per game on essentially a playoff team, and he's going to be a star. He's insane. And who is that? Is our point? Who is the SGA that we could go get right now? The dude who is not viewed like a superstar yet, and they think, oh, he could be pretty good. He's probably going to be pretty good. He's a lottery pick. But who could that potentially be? So I have a few options out here, not necessarily highlighting who that player is, but other potential trade options that have been speculated with and could potentially happen. So I have on this list Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Spurs, which is kind of a dark horse one we talked about, and then one I've inserted personally is the Thunder, which they have every asset possible. And I don't know if Dame would be that upset to go play there. I mean, that's a winning franchise. It is going to take maybe 2 years instead of instantly. But they're ready to be a 6 seed. I think they're in position.
In rumors for any superstar that becomes available from here.
I agree.
They're going to pull the trigger at some point. Maybe let's be honest, it's probably not this year. It's probably next offseason or an offseason after that even.
Yeah.
But you're right. They have kind of the core. They have the ammo to pull the trigger whenever they want.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they were even kind of discussed in Kevin Durant rumors when he asked out last summer.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that'd be cool. I think it's extremely unlikely. I think even in my opinion, the Sixers is somewhat unlikely. They do not have a good package. They don't really have much draft capital to give up.
Yeah.
Tyrese Maxey is, in my opinion, a better player than Tyler Hero, but I think he kind of nets a similar return on the open market. We obviously wouldn't want to keep Tyrese Maxey having the 3 guards that we have. I think he nets a similar type of return. I think he has a similar amount of trade value on the open market. And we'd be taking on probably Tobias Harris's contract for salary.
It'd be roughly Maxey, Harris, 3 pick swaps at first, and then multiple seconds. That's like kind of the ones I surveyed online.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. And I think that package is just, it's worse than Miami's. Like, let's be honest.
100%. I agree.
And yes, Dame would definitely be attracted to playing with Joel Embiid. I think that's probably pretty likely. He hasn't said that, but I think we can kind of assume. But I don't think he'd be more attractive than wanting to play in Miami. He's vocally said that that's his prioritization. And so if that's what he thinks, and the draft and the trade package is worse, I think it's a pretty much a long shot. So we can get to the Nets. The Nets is interesting. They do have a lot of draft capital from dishing off Kyrie and KD. Specifically, they have a lot of Suns picks. Those Suns picks could get interesting because I think their window's pretty small.
In 3 years, they're going to be the lottery picks for sure.
Yeah. And so they do have
maybe top 7.
They do have some interesting kind of capital. The thing that we'd probably be taking back is Ben Simmons, which I'm not a fan of. Just number one, as a player, sure, you can make the argument that he needs to kind of go to a city like Portland on this rebuilding team where they're going to be bad this year. But I'm kind of out on Ben Simmons as a player at this point. Also, he's not an expiring contract. He would still be on the books next year. And yes, we're trying to rebuild. We're trying to kind of do this whole thing. And that's kind of why the Jeremy Grant contract isn't the worst, in my opinion. You need to be paying someone. We're going to have a ton of rookie deals these next coming years. But I kind of want to take back expiring contracts if we're not huge on the player, if we're not huge on the player's potential. I don't really want a guy who's got multiple years left that we'd have to be paying big money for in a trade like this. So that's kind of why I would not be in love with the Nets trade. Also, I know Dame said that the Heat and the Nets were the teams he talked about on the live when he kind of mentioned the teams he'd be interested in going to.
Yeah.
I really don't think – I don't understand wanting to go to Brooklyn, really. I get
he just likes Mikal.
He's very close with Mikal Bridges.
Yeah.
And seeing Dame and Mikal would be a very fun duo. I think, I talked all offseason about how badly I wanted the Blazers to trade for Mikal. But I don't.
And you know how high I am on him.
Yeah. And I don't. Dame doesn't really. He doesn't care about going to the best team. He wants a chance. He wants a team.
He even said that.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to go to a team with 3 stars, but even though going to Miami is that.
Yeah.
But it's like the furthest thing down the line of a super team.
Yeah.
In the sense the culture, it's not super team culture. And the fill players, it's like, it's just not.
Yeah.
Even though it's going to be. Like the big 3 is the definition of a super team.
Yeah.
But I don't view that as necessarily like jumping on in like a Kevin Durant type of Warriors dynasty.
I don't.
You know what I mean? Like we're in agreement on that. Yeah.
But so I would put Brooklyn as number 2, to be honest, for most likely trade partners, because they do have potentially a better offer than Miami if they were to really get into their picks and things. People
even with Simmons.
I mean that's
the other side.
Point. I mean, I don't know, because I do think those Suns picks are really valuable, and I think Miami's window is somewhat short with Dame and Jimmy as their kind of 2 cornerstones. Those 2 are both getting up there in age.
Yeah,
but Miami kind of never has high picks. They always find a way to kind of retool, and I think that's probably still going to be the case. These Miami picks, I really can't see them being in the top 10, and these Phoenix picks, I definitely could. So I'm really attracted to the idea of building around Scoot and Shaden, and I do want to include Anthony in that as well. And then having those guys be good, and then those guys are signing their extensions and whatnot. Those guys are already proven. They're 4 years into their career, and bam, we get the number 7 pick in the draft. Like, to add to that, I think that's how a lot of teams have gotten over the hump in the past, and that's like an idea that I think is really interesting. So that's kind of why I would maybe lean towards the Nets trade package, but I think that the difference between the Heats and the Nets, it's not much, to be honest.
I think I really like the Nets if they leave Simmons out, and it's so this money checks out here. So Claxton, Royce O'Neal, Dinwiddie, and 3 firsts.
Yeah.
Like that's fire in my opinion. That's better than the Miami one. I personally think. I think it's close to being, if not. I mean, it's pretty similar, right?
It's because Claxton is out of position of need and Hero isn't, so it makes it like you're like, oh, what are we getting in with a third team?
And then I agree with you with the Philadelphia stuff. Like, I think if they were dealing Maxey, I think it's the same thing. Like, we probably have to do a third team has to come in because Maxey just doesn't make any sense unless we want to get Maxey and then dish Anthony, which I'd rather have Anthony than Maxey personally.
Yeah.
And so then the dark horse teams, quickly, I have 2 deals like lined up here. So with the Spurs, like a hypothetical one is Zach Collins, Doug McDermott, Devin Vassell, 3 to 4 firsts because they have lots of picks, right?
Yeah.
And so that could potentially check out and work. And then with the Thunder, which is to me probably the best possible package we could get from a team, like. And I don't even know if they'd be willing to deal this and make this exact deal. I was just messing around with the trade machine and seeing what would check out. So Dort, Latvian Laser, Bertans, world's worst contract. But, I mean, we'd be fine with taking it on to balance it out. And then Josh Giddey. And then depending on how they decided to deal it, it could potentially be 2 firsts and then 2 seconds or whatever it is. And their firsts are from all sorts of different teams. So we'd have our lot to choose from. So, but it would just be, we could add Giddey, and I just don't know how that would work with Giddey and Scoot. And it could work. Even Giddey's 6'8". It's just like that's 2 primary ball handlers. And then Anthony too. And so do you keep Anthony at that point, or how do you, from a basketball standpoint, make that work? Yeah. So, I mean, it's just an interesting concept. And then Dort too, like he could be our bulldog type guy, or he could be our lockdown defender. So
I love Lou Dort. I wanted Lou Dort before we kind of did this whole rebuild thing. I think that would have been a good win now piece. But so with all these trade packages on the table and with kind of the context that we set, if you were Joe Cronin right now, how would you approach this next week? What would you do to get this franchise on track for this new direction?
If I was Joe Cronin, okay, so I got to get out of my Miami Heat fandom shoes because like we were talking about earlier, where the biases come in. If I could just snap my fingers and make a decision, I'd want him to go to the Heat because I just want to watch that from a basketball standpoint. As a fan, it's going to be electric if he goes there. Yeah. Most entertaining narrative in the league, I think. Let's assume the Thunder are out of it. And let's say it's Miami, Brooklyn, Philadelphia, and the Spurs. We'll also throw the Spurs out just because it's like kind of unrealistic too. I'd probably take, if you could get Claxton, Royce O'Neal, Dinwiddie, and 3 firsts, I'd probably do that. If
it was Simmons, though, you'd take the Miami one?
If it was Simmons, 100% Miami, not even a question. I don't. Like, who's going to take minutes from? Yeah. Right? Like, I would rather get less and then Shaedon Sharpe gets to play more minutes and learn and grow more than get Simmons to take minutes and then create drama and whatever it is. Don't get me wrong, Simmons, he could have a revival and be good again. And he's a great defender. If he just decided, I want to stay healthy, I'm not going to care about any of the outside world, and I just want to try to play 60-plus games a year and be a defender, and facilitate and play 20 to 25 minutes, dude, all this narrative ends. Because he has the – it's like almost kind of like a little bit different, and I'm going to talk about this later when we're talking about favorite acquisitions, but kind of like what Russell Westbrook did, all the bad narrative that he had and the way when he switched up to the Clippers and ended up on the Clippers, he kind of focused on what his strengths are up to that point and what he could control and was a total win contributor. And I think Simmons could do that. Not to say I think Russell Westbrook is far beyond Simmons' status.
Yeah,
but
no, for sure.
you get what I'm saying. So
No, yeah.
So yeah. What
Yeah.
about you?
I mean, I agree. I think the number one thing is to kind of work with Dame on this. If he's coming into that front office right now with the mentality like you need to get me to Miami, like a few sources have reported, then I'm willing to do that. I'm trying working my ass off to get the best value out of the Miami trade, and doing what you have to do, kind of working behind the scenes, feeding media narratives to Woj and whatnot, which is what I think Cronin's doing right now, to be honest. But I'm working to get him to Miami, which is the place he wants to go badly, and I'm working to extract as much value as I can out of them in return. If he was to like say, yeah, I'm cool with these teams, and the teams were like Brooklyn, Miami, and Philly, let's say, I agree with you. I think if you can get Nicholas Claxton plus picks, I think that's a better return. And if Dame was cool with doing that, I think you should do that. Finally, I think we probably both agree on this. I think Joe Cronin should call a press conference and apologize to the fan base and Damian Lillard, and he shouldn't do this politician crap that he's been doing, talking about how we're still competitive, we're going to win now. I think he should call a press conference, apologize for leading the franchise in the wrong direction, apologize for committing to something, to verbally committing for something and then not coming through, apologize for failing a franchise superstar and saying, this is the new direction. We're going to rebuild. We're going to go young. We're giving the keys of the franchise to Scoot Henderson. We're building for the future. We're going to make moves that reflect that. And we're going to work so that a situation like this doesn't happen again. And I think he needs to do that. And I don't think that's going to happen. But I think that's the most important part of this Dame trade saga, to be honest.
I understand what you're saying, but think about it from his perspective. And just like, I understand there's a mistake that was made there, but he already has so much hate and heat. Like, if you put yourself in his shoes, like, yes, he made that mistake, but he's a rookie GM, and like he started from the bottom of the Blazers staff, and he started as an intern and then moved all the way up, right? And so this is his first time experiencing all this stuff, and it's definitely a high pressure situation with the greatest player in a team's franchise ever, and like him making demands and all this stuff, and not demands, but expectations. And already with all the hatred he has, I feel like if he did a press conference like that, then he'd lose everyone's confidence in him, even if it is the right thing to do. I don't know if he needs to say
starting now, this is the direction that we're committing to. Because if you saw the report yesterday, them talking about like they still think they're going to be competitive this year. Like, enough of that, dude. Like, you weren't competitive with Damian Lillard. Why would you be competitive without him? Like, just commit to the direction. Say, look, this is going to be some years of rebuilding. We're going to be primarily focused on development. And at the same time, you can be super excited about Scoot Henderson. You can use this opportunity as a time to hype him up, and Shaden Sharp and all those guys, and whoever you get in return for Dame. But the way he kind of just handles everything is so like two-faced and so like playing both sides. It's so politician-like. It's a term I've used a lot. And I think he needs to really like. I get that. I guess all GMs are politicians in some sense, but I don't know. After a situation like this, I think it would be beneficial to kind of say something like that to the fan base. I don't know.
Yeah, in some form, shape, or fashion. Yeah. Even if it was just next press conference, he makes some type of statement. And it doesn't necessarily need to be because I kind of agree with you just in the sense that he needs to address it, or he could address it and improve his relationship with the fan base, and because it's really poor right now. Yeah. I'm not saying it's deserved. Like he's just making deals, doing business, doing what he can. Like he shouldn't be getting this much hate and like really aggressive content towards his direction. But he could just like state in some shape or form. From now on, like you just said, I'd like to take it in a direction of transparency. Obviously, we're not going to be in the playoffs from a high-level contention standpoint this year. Like we're going to work with our team to grow and build a championship team going forward. In the past, we talked about building a championship roster around Damian Lillard, and we failed to do that. Like it's just at least a statement like that, as we failed to do that, instead of acknowledging it as if you did everything you could and you tried extremely hard and you expended every resource, which they might have, but from outside looking in, it doesn't seem like that.
It doesn't.
Who knows? We're not in the door.
But no, you're right.
So,
you're right. Yeah.
So that's it on kind of Blazers stuff as far as Damian Lillard. Looking forward, obviously we have our new draft picks, and we'll get into that. But also we have what's kind of unfolded so far in free agency. So we picked up Matisse Thybulle's option, and then I don't remember if it was an option. We returned Matisse Thybulle.
Yeah.
And then let go of Trendon Watford, and that's something in tandem. I want to talk about the Trendon Watford thing and then the Jeremy Grant part, and we can just talk about it quickly. But damn, am I upset about the Trendon Watford thing. And I didn't even know how much I appreciated Trendon Watford until we let him go for nothing. And he was already on a really, really team-friendly contract.
It just makes no sense.
It makes no sense, dude.
Move of Cronin's tenure, and that's saying something because he traded 2 starters for Keon Johnson. You know?
Yeah.
Like, he was on a minimum contract. He was an undrafted. He signed a 2-way, and that was converted into a minimum contract. And he's 22 years old. He fits both timelines. He's at a position of need because Yusuf Nurkic is currently the only center on our roster that's played any NBA basketball. And he is maybe not likely, but possibly on his way out. So I just don't get it, man. Like, why? What is the downside of not waiving Trendon Watford?
Yeah, I mean, from a basketball standpoint, he had the ability to run the point, to guard fives. His three-point shot was developing. His interior teardrop, I can't remember the exact statistic, but I believe it was top 3 in the league, highest percentage shot inside 5 feet. Him. For like some certain constraint of players, but really good. And he's the lob threat to Shaden. Like he dished every lob that Shaden had. To go look at Shaden Sharp highlights, he's the one dishing all those lobs. And it's just he was a good culture guy too.
Oh, he's great. He's a great locker room guy. I'm just envisioning this tanking team this year, and I just thought Trendon Watford could have been a really fun piece of that.
I did too. I think Trendon Watford could be at least a 12 points per game guy, 6 rebounds per game, 2+ assists. Like, I think he's legit. I think he could be on a championship team in 3-4 years.
Someone's gonna get him, and he's gonna play minutes, and he's gonna be pretty solid. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's puzzling. Nobody understands that move. I'm sure he will get grilled about that decision when he addresses the media. I'm sure somebody will ask him about that, and I'm curious to see what he has to say because there's not an easy way out like with the Scoot Henderson. Oh, we're drafting for talent. That's a very easy answer. I don't think there's an easy answer to why did you waive Trendon Watford. So I'm curious to see what Joe Cronin has to say about that.
Dude, especially because we signed Jeremy to the 5-year, $160 million deal. You could just allocate $5 million of that, make it 5 years for $155, and then continue to have Trendon on his $2.4 million contract per year contract. Whatever I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was about $2.4 million. Like that seems like a no-brainer to me. I bet even Jeremy would have been like, you could directly ask Jeremy Grant, said, "Hey, you want to cut $5 million from this and then give it to Trendon so he can stay on the team?" And I don't know if that's how you would go about business in that situation, but that's a no-brainer.
Well, there's also a salary. There's also a minimum that you have to be at, and I don't know if this was before or after he knew that Damian Lillard was going to be asking to be traded, but we're going to be a very cheap team coming up. You need minimum contracts to fill out the roster. You need guys making a bit of money. You need 15 roster spots, 15 players making money. Why use one of those spots on a player that's less proven and probably worse than Trendon Watford? The 15th man on our team this year is definitely going to be worse than Trendon Watford. I can confidently say that. So I just
the 10th man will be worse.
Probably the 9th. He was this year.
8th.
Trendon Watford was better than the 10th man on our team this year. It's just
Trendon was arguably the 7th or 8th best player on our team.
Yes.
And in certain moments, he was the 4th. Yeah. Like, there were games where he was absolutely just showing off every single trait he had.
Yeah.
Like, he's a very fun player to watch. from a low-key standpoint. Like, he just does a lot of interesting stuff. So I really hope he goes somewhere, that where he can get minutes.
Yeah.
And be who he is, because I'd be really disappointed if he went somewhere and they just don't play him and his career fizzles off, because he just needs the opportunity. I think he's there. All right, so now we'll just break down the 3 draft picks we got: Scoot Henderson, Chris Murray, and Ryan Rupert. We're gonna both kind of talk about Scoot together, and then I'm gonna focus on talking about Chris, and then Kyle's going to focus on talking about Ryan, and we'll give input to each other as we go. But as far as Scoot, I mean, everyone kind of is familiar with his game. He's been one of those high-level prospects for the past 3 years since he joined G League Ignite 2 years ago. And I mean, he's a freak. He's Russell Westbrook in almost every metric, and probably has a more polished jumper already, better looking mechanics.
Yeah.
And he's Russell Westbrook, one of my favorite players ever. His change of pace isn't bad, but that's definitely, I wouldn't say, his strong suit. Russell's very one-speed, fast, aggressive, power. Scoot does a really good job of changing pace with that same power and same build and same athleticism, but he also has shake and he's smooth. And so I think that's like the aesthetic part of his game that I think really encapsulates people, and I think he's going to show people right away. Yeah. I think he's going to put up pretty dang good numbers as a rookie. I don't think statistically he's going to be a good shooter yet, but I do think he has the tools to do it. And if you listen to him in interviews, dude, he 100% has the mind to get better, and you can tell he's going to start buying into defense, and he wants to do everything he possibly can to get better. And the way he's handled all the Dame media and all that news and all that drama, and is he going to be the franchise player? Is he going to not? Is he going to be replacing someone at this point? And he just deals with it seamlessly. And he gives all the right answers. Sometimes guys in interviews, they're giving those scripted answers like, I'm just focusing on what I can control. I'm just trying to play hard. Like they give those very scripted answers, and it sounds inauthentic. When he does it, he means it when you listen to him say it. 100%. He's really, you can tell that like his mind is in the right spot. And he can tell he's so grateful, not just to get drafted. He's grateful to be playing in the summer league. He's grateful to have a jersey on his back. He's grateful to be surrounded by great players. He's grateful for each and every moment. And when you see that in a player, not only is that exciting, but I think that's dangerous for other people, because that means he's not taking for granted the athleticism and things he's been given at all. I think he's going to be great. Yeah, I think he's exactly who I would want to start a franchise around. Even contrary to our arguments about him versus starting around Mikal Bridges, which we'll probably talk about at some point on this pod. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with Scoot. I think Scoot Henderson has potential in every aspect of basketball, and that's just the kind of skills he hasn't developed already. What's there already is the first step, the explosion, the burst, the acceleration, the verticality, the athleticism, and the playmaking. The playmaking is, I think, his strongest suit right now. I think he's a Russell Westbrook level playmaker, like you said. He processes the game at a very high speed. He's been playing with at the closest thing to the NBA since he was 17. His first step and his athleticism and his speed allows him to get into lanes and draw help very easily, and he reads that help and is able to dish it to his teammates at a level that very, very few players ever achieve, and he's 19 years old. I think his shot is going to struggle in year one. I don't think his mechanics are bad at all, in my opinion. I think he could definitely develop into even a better shooter than all 3 of the main players that he's compared to, and that's Ja Morant, Derrick Rose, and Russell Westbrook. I think I do see kind of like a Ja level jumper for him right now. Ja's not a great shooter, but he takes a decent enough of them a game, and while players do sag off of him, they are forced to respect him, especially in big moments. I think that's really all you need in a player like Scoot, who's so good downhill and so good with the first step. I don't think his shot mechanics are bad. I think off the dribble, it's fine as well. I think a lot of practice with NBA shooting coaches and just more reps, I think his jumper will be fine.
And who his workout partner was a few months ago. You see who that was? Or maybe even a few weeks ago. Dude, he works with Steph.
Really?
He's been, you got to go watch that clip, dude. He's been literally doing workouts with Steph and learning a ton about him. He's like close with him. And then like he has a relationship with Dame,
Yeah.
and that relationship started before he was even rumored, before Portland even got the third pick, I think. And so like, he's trying to listen to the vets, and that's always a good sign too. Someone who wants to be great is someone who's already talking to those who already are. So,
and yeah, that's the other aspect of it. Scoot's character, everything I've watched from him is he's a 10 out of 10 character guy. He's thrust into a very, very difficult situation right now, like you said. And this is really why I had kind of sold myself on a scenario where Dame kind of mentors Scoot for a year or two, because I think that relationship on the same team would have blossomed. But if there was any player to kind of step into this position of having the keys to the franchise given to you after an 11-year breakup, which pretty much is unheard of in today's NBA, I don't think you could have chosen a better player than Scoot Henderson to kind of take the reins of this franchise. He's a vocal leader. He's a natural leader of men. He's high character. He's just everything you want in a franchise player. And I think I'm really excited to see what he can do, how he develops. Yeah.
You know what's just popped into my head is in the Miami deal, if we also dish, let's say Nurk, hypothetically, probably wouldn't happen. We deal both of them to Miami. But let's just say
I think it could happen, but
maybe, keep going. Maybe. Let's say that occurred, and then so we'd have to return Lowry. I think that'd be great.
Yeah,
to have
I agree, actually,
a direct mentor and vet who does all of the little things.
Yeah,
like that would be the perfect mentor for him, because even if it's not Kyle Lowry and that doesn't end up being it, I think we should be looking for a player to sign to a vet min or whatever it is. That's a guard that can put him under his wing.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like I don't know, like an Earl Watson type guy. Like,
yeah.
I mean, he's like retired now, but like a guy like that.
Like a DeLon Wright or something like that.
Yeah. Someone who like
Monte Morris.
Yeah. Someone who's a vet and can put him under his wing.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that would be super beneficial for him.
Yeah. In terms of Scoot, though, I mean, everything has been said about him already.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody knows who Scoot Henderson is. Everybody's known who Scoot Henderson is. And, it's been difficult for me over the past couple weeks to like get excited for Scoot Henderson. I never really thought Scoot Henderson would be a Blazer this whole time. Even when we got the third pick, I didn't ever see that scenario playing out.
I didn't either. We talked about it so many times.
Yeah.
How I thought Brandon Miller was going to go third for sure, and Scoot was going to go 2. I didn't think Hornets would pass on him. I thought there was no chance. Even with the speculation coming out, I told you from day one, there is no way they pass on this dude.
Yeah.
And Miller might end up being good, but they passed on him, so who knows?
But yeah, it's Scoot Henderson. Everybody kind of knows his skill set and whatnot. Let's get into the other 2 rookies.
Yeah. So Chris Murray, obviously the twin of Keegan Murray, who 12 points per game last year, shot 40% from 3, roughly 40% from 3. Believe broke the rookie record for most threes made in a season. Played well in the playoffs. I think he's going to be an all-star. I don't think that's far-fetched at all. I think he's going to be a 20 points per game guy the next 3 years. I mean, he's just got all the tools there. He's got the right system. Keegan Murray, I'm talking about specifically. And that's to piggyback off of the fact that Chris Murray is not that different of a player. I mean, come on, guys. He's his twin. He averaged essentially the same thing at Iowa. The only difference is essentially he's a little bit less rebounds. He had more assists. Chris Murray did. And then Chris Murray also had some better defensive statistics, or Keegan Murray had some better defensive statistics. But Chris shot worse from 3. But he also took more threes. He took about 2 more threes per game and shot roughly 34%, while 33%, 34%, while Keegan, I think, shot around 38, 39. And so, like, as far as I can view it, that's like the difference in the draft grade and where he was evaluated and where he got picked. Like, is it pretty much that 3-point percentage and then maybe some defensive impact? But both of those things are 100% fixable. I mean, he's got every tool. I mean, and he also has a brother who has already done it in his corner that's going to be able to give him pointers as he goes throughout the process. Even keeled, you listen to him talk, he's he's good. He's gonna be good. And I think if we hit on him and he was an all rookie guy and a double digit in points in the next 2 years, big deal.
Yeah.
I think he could solve a lot of our holes defensively, and then from a versatile standpoint as far as forwards. And so I'm really excited about his game. I mean, the only thing about his jumper specifically is he's obviously a lefty and not a righty, and it's a little less smooth than Keegan Murray's. Keegan Murray's shot is much more fluid, early release timing, very smooth. And Keegan's Chris is still smooth, but it's a little bit less like in a straight line, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, it looked good in the videos I saw of him working out in summer league and stuff. So I'm excited about him personally.
Yeah. There's a lot of like talk about if the Blazers are going to rebuild the Chris Murray pick doesn't make a lot of sense, and I thought that at first too. I was pretty low when we picked him. I wasn't a fan of the draft pick on draft night, but I definitely came off of that stance, and that's just because a good player is a good player regardless of the upside they have and regardless of the direction you're going. If we're rebuilding, if we're trying to win now, if we're trying to win in 3 years, you need players like Chris Murray. You know, if we were to swing for upside at the 23rd pick and drafted a Leonard Miller, who's kind of who I was wanting to go with, if that upside doesn't pan out, it's worth nothing. Keegan Murray or Chris Murray is going to be able to shoot threes at a high clip. He's going to defend. He's going to be able to defend multiple positions. He's not going to turn it over. You're always going to need a player like that. If you're young and your average age is 21 years old, you still need a player like that. So
I think he probably starts his rookie year too.
At the 3?
I would not be surprised at all.
I don't think so. I think they're going to start sharp at the 3.
You think so? It's going to be the 3?
Yeah, that's what I think. It's going towards, but maybe
we'll see. Yeah,
but yeah, I'm a fan of Chris Murray. I think he's like almost a lock to be a solid role player in the NBA, and you always need guys like that. So I'm excited to see what he can do. We've been in need of a forward who can shoot off the bench and defend multiple positions. So this is like the exact archetype of the player we need. Anything else on Chris Murray for you?
He's a better passer than people give him credit for. A lot better than people realize. I think he can, and that's part of why I think he legitimately has a chance to be a starter. Like I was saying, and even if that's not instant, I think his game is going to be polished enough, and his experience is going to be polished enough that he's going to just contribute to winning no matter what. Maybe he doesn't fit into that role specifically. We'll see, but from a numbers standpoint, we have so many guards that it's hard to jungle that around. And defensively, that's a bad lineup. I mean, objectively, with Ant, Scoot, and Shaedon.
Yeah.
Although I do think Scoot's going to have a defensive leap this year. I don't know how significant it's going to be, but he's definitely going to be better defensively. I think he's going to be decent. If you watch Shaedon in interviews, dude, like just the summer league media stuff, he sounds so different than he did last year. It's almost like he everything zeroed in. He became more mature and is like much more ready to just be impactful and be a pro. And don't get me wrong, he was last year, but he was learning everything, and it was obvious that he was in the process of learning stuff. And it seems like he's got stuff kind of locked in right now. And I'm really excited to see him.
The 3 guards, I'm very much against kind of trading out Anthony Simons at this point. I still think he's got a leap to take. He's only 23 years old. He averaged 20 points a game, and he's one of the best shooters in the NBA. And on the defensive side of the ball, he actually has more potential than people think.
I totally agree, dude. I totally agree with you.
And that's why I think this kind of 3-guard rotation of Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, and Shane Sharp really could work. I think all 3 of them have way higher defensive potential than people think. I think those 3 could all be good defenders in the NBA. Good to great, to be honest. So that's kind of what I'm excited about. I would not be looking to sell any of these 3 players right now, especially if the rumors about Anthony Simons' trade value being low are true. I would definitely not want to sell him at a discount. I think he can play alongside both of these 2 pretty seamlessly, to be honest. I mean, he played off of Damian Lillard last year, and I think him and Scoot as kind of a duo, I think they kind of complement each other really well, to be honest. The big question is, you just wish Shaedon was more of a natural 3 than a 2. We wish that last year as well. But like you said, if Shaedon is going to really lock in on defense, and at the end of the last year, Chauncey pretty much just when we were tanking, he just pretty much just put Shaden on the best player and said, go to the Wolves, like go see what it's like to guard the top of the top talent in the NBA. And
Yeah.
Shaden definitely had good moments, I thought. I mean, obviously he made a ton of defensive mistakes last year, but I thought he had some good moments towards the end of the year on the defensive side. And obviously all three of them have the tools to be really great defenders. So yeah, I guess we're off on a little bit of a tangent with that, but
Yeah.
I can kind of talk about Ryan Rupert really quick. Very raw prospect, but the defensive upside is so real. I watch his film, and the way he moves, the way he kind of causes chaos and causes problems for opposing offenses reminds me a lot of Mikal Bridges. He's got the length of Mikal Bridges. He was listed as a 6'6" shooting guard when we drafted him, and I saw that. I was like, 6'6", okay, that's some size, but like a shooting guard. He has the height to play power forward. He has the size to play power forward. He can play 2 through 4, in my opinion. He is going to be a monster on defense. His instincts are great. I keep going back to the length because he just, when you look at him on the court, it's almost like Shaden, honestly. When you look at Shaden on the court, his arms are so freakishly long, and it honestly makes him look way bigger than he is. I think it's the same thing with Rupert, except Rupert has 2 inches on Shaden even. So that's kind of speaks to his defensive upside. He gets really good contests on pull-ups and things like that a lot of time. He's able to have a little bit of rim protection on drives and things like that without fouling, and getting in passing lanes, ripping ball handlers. It's all there. I think Rupert's going to be a great NBA defender once he gets some reps under his belt.
He's also laterally really quick, and tying in directly to what you just said. So Shaden's got a 7-foot wingspan. Rupert has a 7'3" wingspan. Yeah. And so they both have they're built the same lengthwise.
Yeah.
And so that defensive ability is definitely there. And then also, which I think is actually underrated, is Rupert's jumper looks pretty dang good.
I was just going to that. His jumper was consistent numbers-wise, but I think his mechanics look good. When I saw his form, I was like, I got some confidence in that, to be honest. I don't think it looks bad in the slightest.
Yeah, which I actually think is interesting because the player comparison is Nick Batum with him, with a lot of people. And I believe they're from a similar area in France.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And they maybe played for a similar farm system in their club growing up. But his jumper looks a little bit like his too. Like the way his arms are kind of Batum was also a lengthy guy, and just the way he kind of narrowed his body a little bit, it's a similar jumper. And so I think he could be a steal as a second round pick, and I think he could be a rotational guy. But at the same time, he also could be Frank Ntilikina. So we'll see. Sure. But I don't hope that to happen in any way, shape, or form. But we'll see.
We've been in such bad need of a Nick Batum since he's left, to be honest. Just to do it all small forward who's a disruptor, a point of attack defender on the other end. I saw a trade where the Clippers were the third team getting Tyler Hero. I don't think that's very likely anymore. And Batum and some other contracts were being sent our way. And if Batum and Rupert could kind of, because I know they have a relationship like you talked about already, if Batum was there to kind of mentor Rupert for a little bit, I think that'd be so awesome. Because that is the only thing that kind of concerns me. There is no 3 on this roster, really. There's Nasir Little. You could call Thibault, swing him down to a 3, I guess. But we don't even have a true vet small forward on this roster. And I just wish we had Ryan Rupert, but a guy who's been in the league and as that archetype and has some experience kind of being the point of attack defender. And I guess that's Thibault, but I don't know.
That's exactly why I was saying Chris Murray would be the starter, potentially. Yeah. And him or Matisse. Even if, I think bringing Shaden off as a 6th man, I don't think that's the craziest thing.
I agree. I'd be fine with that.
Yeah. Even though, or maybe Scoot as a 6. Maybe, I don't know how that would shape up. You probably want to give Scoot enough minutes. I mean, it doesn't make as much sense. But Shaden's got kind of the game where he could be a really good 6th man. And in no way, shape, or form is he going to stay a 6th man.
No, yeah.
But I think he could be 14 plus points per game, 6th man of the year candidate.
I completely agree.
So, but also he could start in that role and improve defensively. And I mean, it's not like they're, whatever the front office says, they're not going to be trying to win this next year. It doesn't.
Yeah. I forgot. I want to mention this very briefly, a little bit off topic. Yeah. I think it is very important that we are bad this year.
I agree.
I think it's absolutely essential that we have very good lottery odds this year. because we are
Yeah.
going to at some point need to get kind of a young, maybe not athletic, but some kind of talent at the center position that fits the timeline of Scoot and Shaden.
Yeah.
And even a forward too as well. I know we like Chris Murray and Jeremy Grant's here right now on a 5-year deal, but we're gonna need players at those positions that fit this timeline, and we're gonna need one more guy at least. We're gonna need one more like really high upside guy who matches that Shaden Sharp, Scoot Henderson level upside at a different position that's not a guard.
He has to be a two-way player though.
Yeah.
Has to be.
Yeah.
No
for sure,
ifs, ands, or
for
buts about it. If it's a forward or it's a center, has to be a two-way player.
Yeah, and I'm not too familiar with this draft yet. I know I've heard
We'll
these
get into it.
upcoming drafts aren't the best. We're coming off a great one, but what I've heard from just about the prospects is they're a bit weaker of classes, but that doesn't really mean anything. I mean, there's going to be good players to find, and just like there is in every draft class, and I think it's very important that we give ourselves a good chance at getting one of the better players, the better prospects, and I think it's very important that we make the right pick in this draft and probably next year's draft as well.
All right, so last segment we're going to do is we're going to do a sports movie draft, all the greatest sports movies ever, and we're going to get a starting 5, each of us, and just see who has the best lineup. So, Kyle, if you want, you can have the first pick. I'll let you have it. So,
I don't know if you're going to pick a lot of my picks, so I'm excited for this. My first pick is not even close, to be honest. It's Raging Bull. Raging Bull is a top 20 movie for me. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's my favorite Martin Scorsese movie. I love how they kind of use boxing. It's a boxing movie, but it's more a character study about a guy who was a boxer at one point. It's Robert De Niro's second best performance as far as I'm concerned. It's beautifully shot in black and white. Raging Bull is kind of in its own league, in my opinion, as far as sports movies go.
Yeah. Great pick. I think it's right on par with who you are.
Yeah.
I feel like picking the actual, like, really, really good movie.
Yeah.
So I think classic. I think I'm going to kind of have a similar theme to what you have, is same sport. I think I'm going to go Rocky just because it's too classic and it's too legendary not to take. I feel like that's a good second overall pick. So I'm going to go Rocky.
That's kind of the definitive kind of competition movie, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly.
Underdog story. It's pretty much the definitive story as far as that goes. My 100%. Second pick. Wait, are we like snaking or is it?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
My second pick is going to be. Okay, so this is. So I just picked like the good like black and white Martin Scorsese movie, and now I'm gonna completely 180. I'm gonna pick Happy Gilmore with my second pick.
That's fire.
So
I love
like
that.
Happy Gilmore, another like I guess not your traditional like sports movie, but it's very much centered around a sport. It's my favorite Adam Sandler comedy. It's just timeless. I mean, we all watched Happy Gilmore with our dads. It's a funny ass movie. It's one of my favorite comedies, to be honest. And I honestly feel comfortable with it at my number 2 pick.
Got you. Oh, I'm in a dilemma right now. I kind of want to go similar theme to you with like legendary, really good movie with the first pick, and then kind of a curveball, funnier movie with the second one. I think I got to do it. I think I'm going to go Talladega Nights.
That's okay. That's
I just think it's too quotable of a movie. I've watched it too many times. It's just too good to leave on the board. And I think the next one you may pass on. So I think I'm going to try to anticipate that. All right. Yeah.
I think I got 2. I think I got 2 that I think you're going to pass on. So I'm going to leave those and go with one that I think is honestly an overrated movie, but I think it's still really good. And that's Moneyball. Obviously like a big analytics guy. Big Brad Pitt fan. I guess there's not really many movies kind of in this category that are like it. Moneyball, it's a good movie. It's better than a lot of kind of classic sports movies.
That's exactly what I was going to take. That sucks.
Really? Dang.
Yeah, damn it. All right.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to take. That's tough. Now I'm between 2 then for the next one. I think I got to go to this one just because I grew up watching it a lot and I just love it. All right, I think I'm gonna pivot from that, and I'm gonna do that one last, hopefully. So I think I'm gonna take Jerry Maguire just because it's
Okay. Wait.
the
So
only one we got.
What's your team?
So I'm Rocky, Talladega Nights, and Jerry Maguire.
Okay.
Your three is fire though.
Raging Bull, Happy Gilmore, and Moneyball.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Moneyball, yeah.
Okay, fourth pick. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the pick. I'm not sure if you've seen this movie or not. This is definitely a better movie than Moneyball and Happy Gilmore. But I don't know if you've seen it, so I was hoping it would fall. It's I, Tonya, the Tonya Harding movie starring Margot Robbie.
Oh, I have seen that. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
I think this movie is great. Like, I'm a huge fan of this movie. I've seen it multiple times. It's a Best Actress caliber performance for Margot Robbie. Probably, maybe her best role. It's just a classic biopic, but not really a sport we think about too much, but a very kind of popular scandal. And I think it did a good job of showing kind of all sides to it. And I think it's just a super entertaining, well-made movie.
Yeah, good choice. All right, let me write that in. I tell you. Next one, I think I gotta survey my options real quick. There's some classic ones here still. There's some ones that I personally like. All right, yeah, I'm gonna do this. Spike Lee joint. He Got Game. I think that's easy decision. I got to get a good director in there. So
yeah, that's
cool.
That's probably the best basketball movie.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot, but that's probably historically like known as the best one.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there's definitely some classics still on the board. I'm gonna go with my favorite. This is an underrated classic. I'd say. I think it should be in the conversation with like. I don't know. I guess the other classics that are on the board, whatever those may be to you, but I'm going with the movie Miracle, about the miracle on ice. I've watched this. I don't know. I'm super like nostalgic for this movie. I think I watched this a lot as a kid. Kurt Russell, great performance as the coach. Like it's super cheesy. It's super like Disney biopic-y, but like it's just so classic, man. Like that's like honestly, it's not a better movie than Rocky, but like that's my like classic underdog story like pick, you know?
Yeah. I like that. All right. Last pick's hard. There's a lot of pretty dang good options on there.
I think I might know what you're going to go with. Let's see.
I don't think you do because I don't even know. But let's see. I feel like I need to like drop the football movie. There's so many good basketball ones still on there. I'll just let you know because this is the last pick. So I'm deciding between Coach Carter, The Longest Yard, White Men Can't Jump, and Friday Night Lights.
I thought Coach Carter was going to be the one you chose.
Yeah, that's the one. I almost took that too. So I kind of feel like I gotta probably come back to that. So I'll finish with that. It's pretty on brand. It's one of my favorite movies ever.
Yeah.
So, all right. So final lineup for me: Rocky, Talladega Nights, Jerry Maguire, He Got Game, and Coach Carter. And Kyle, you can say the rest of your list.
And mine is Raging Bull, Happy Gilmore, Moneyball, I, Tonya, and Miracle.
Love it. I don't know if we have any listeners yet, but we can put a poll on there and have people vote for which one's better. So
yeah.
All right, cool. So as far as closing this out, really appreciate anybody who listened to this, and it's been fun this week preparing for it. I had a lot of great time trying to develop kind of stuff to talk about and arguments and points of views and interacting with Kyle and planning out what we were going to say. I think it's really fun, creative process. And I just can't wait for next week and for us to improve and put out better content. So thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun doing this. It's really been a good time. It's been very enjoyable. It's a lot of stuff kind of behind the scenes to figure out with this now. So I'm looking forward to that as well, kind of picking up some new skills. But yeah, this is a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to next week.